Escalating tensions in the Middle East have taken a dangerous turn as the conflict between Iran and Israel moves from shadowy proxy warfare to direct confrontation. On October 1st, Iran launched its second barrage of missiles targeting Israel, marking a significant escalation in this already volatile region. Analysts are pointing to a major shift in Iran's military strategy. Traditionally reliant on proxy forces like Hezbollah and Hamas, Iran is now engaging in direct attacks, seeking to deter further aggression by making its own territory a red line. Experts say any future attacks on Iranian soil will be met with swift retaliation. The situation has also raised alarms over the safety of UN peacekeeping forces. Israeli strikes on positions held by the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, have injured peacekeepers and put the mission's future in jeopardy. Global leaders are expressing growing concern for the safety of these personnel caught in the crossfire. Beyond the immediate conflict, Iran's nuclear ambitions are causing anxiety across the international community. While Tehran does not yet have nuclear weapons, experts warn that they could produce enough fissile material for a weapon in just a few months. The collapse of the 2015 nuclear agreement, along with Iran's expanding missile capabilities, have only intensified fears. Iran's missile arsenal is substantial, and recent strikes on Israel have demonstrated a willingness to use these powerful weapons. Missiles like the Fatah-1 and Khaybar-Shikan have ranges that cover the entire Middle East, and experts worry that future attacks could be even larger and harder to intercept. The stakes of this conflict extend far beyond the region. A nuclear-armed Iran could destabilize the entire Middle East, while potentially sparking a nuclear arms race. Moreover, growing ties between Iran, Russia, and China are adding new layers of complexity to an already precarious geopolitical landscape. Urgent diplomacy is now required to prevent further bloodshed. There are calls for renewed negotiations with Iran to curb its nuclear program, and for immediate steps to ensure the safety of UN peacekeepers. The coming days will be critical as the world watches closely to see how this conflict unfolds. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor this rapidly evolving situation in the Middle East. That's all from my site. Now it's time for the studio podcast.
Okay, so you've sent over some seriously heavy articles on the Middle East. I mean, we're talking about a region where it feels like one wrong move could set the whole thing ablaze.
Yeah.
The powder keg,
yeah.
Right? Lots of escalating tensions, especially between Israel and Iran.
Right.
With everyone caught in the crossfires.
Yeah.
We're diving in deep today to kind of unpack it all. No life vest required.
Okay.
But maybe hold on to your hats because it's heavy stuff. We're going beyond the headlines here, right?
Absolutely.
We're trying to understand the human cost of this conflict, particularly for those peacekeepers who are stuck in the middle.
Yeah, you're right to point that out. You know, the human cost. It's so easy to get lost in the geopolitical chess game, but we have to remember that these are real lives, being shattered.
Yeah.
And hopefully, our deep dive today should give everyone listening a much clearer understanding of not just what's happening, but why it's happening and what it means for the everyday lives of those in the region.
Absolutely. So the articles paint a picture of, almost constant retaliation between Israel and Iran, right?
Yeah.
First, we saw Israel allegedly conducting airstrikes in Beirut in response to Iranian missile attacks. Then there's the situation in Gaza with Hamas. Then there's the tension with Hezbollah and Lebanon. I mean, it's a lot to keep track of. Can you help us connect the dots here? What's really driving this current wave of violence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the recent missile attacks, particularly those coming directly from Iranian soil and targeting Israel, mark a real turning point here. You see, for decades, Iran has relied on these proxy groups like Hezbollah to indirectly challenge Israel. So this shift to direct confrontation signals a pretty major change in strategy. I think it's a move away from, and I'm trying to remember the exact term in the article, I think it was called strategic patience.
Yeah, that's right, strategic patience.
Yeah.
That term really stood out in the articles.
Yes. And it's key to understanding Iran's current posture, because for years, Iran exercised restraint, relying on diplomacy and these kind of covert operations, All the while, they were building up their military capabilities. But recent events suggest a move towards a more assertive and confrontational approach. It's almost like they're showcasing their military strength, particularly their missile program, as a deterrent.
Okay, hold on a second. See, that doesn't make sense to me. If Iran wants to deter Israel, wouldn't aligning themselves so openly with Russia, especially right now with everything happening in Ukraine, wouldn't that kind of have the opposite effect? Wouldn't that embolden Israel and its allies even more?
Yeah, that's a very astute observation. And it gets to the complexity of the situation, right? Because Iran is playing a very dangerous game. By aligning themselves with Russia, they gain a very powerful ally and potentially access to much more advanced technology. But it also potentially strengthens the resolve of Israel and its Western allies, which could very easily lead to further escalation. So it's a delicate balancing act.
And speaking of escalation, we have to talk about what happened with the UN peacekeeping force, UNIFIL, in Lebanon. It sounds like they're in an impossible situation.
Absolutely, yeah. The articles detail how Israeli forces actually fired on 3 UNIFIL positions, injuring several peacekeepers. And this wasn't just an isolated incident either. There were also reports of explosions near UNIFIL headquarters, which further endangered those peacekeepers.
It's heartbreaking. I mean, these peacekeepers are literally in the line of fire, and they're just trying to do their jobs, which, by the way, is to monitor the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. But with Israel conducting operations against Hezbollah, who they say are embedded near UNIFIL bases, I mean, it just seems like UNIFIL is in an impossible situation.
Exactly. Israel accuses UNIFIL of being too passive, of essentially turning a blind eye to Hezbollah's activities. But at the same time, UNIFIL is limited in what it can do. I mean, they're there for peacekeeping, not to engage in active combat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a no-win situation for UNIFIL. And it really highlights the immense pressure these peacekeepers face every single day, you know? Some of the articles actually included these really harrowing accounts from UNIFIL personnel who are caught between, you know, their mandate to protect civilians, but then also this very real threat to their own safety.
It really underscores how this conflict is about so much more than just military strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's about people whose lives are, I mean, literally caught in the crosshairs. It's about their lives being disrupted, this constant sense of fear and uncertainty.
Precisely, yeah. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of, I think, perhaps the most significant and concerning element of this entire conflict, which is Iran's nuclear ambitions.
All right, the elephant in the room. The articles we shared, they cite some pretty alarming intelligence reports suggesting that Iran could produce enough weapons-grade material for a nuclear weapon in a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
Weeks. That's terrifyingly fast. How should we be understanding this development?
Well, I think it's crucial to distinguish between having enough fissile material for a weapon and actually having a functional, deployable nuclear weapon.
Right.
Okay. The articles, at least as I understand it, suggest that Iran has mastered the process of enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels, specifically 60% enrichment.
Okay.
That's a significant threshold.
Right.
However, there's really no evidence, at least, you know, made public to suggest they've actually overcome the very complex engineering challenges of weaponizing that material or even building a delivery system.
So they might be able to build a bomb, but they don't necessarily have one ready to go right now.
That's the current assessment, yes. But the fact that they have this capability, that they've crossed this enrichment threshold, significantly changes the dynamic of the entire region. It gives them, a leverage, a bargaining chip in any future negotiations.
And the articles point out that, of course, this isn't happening in a vacuum.
Right.
Iran's growing partnership with Russia and China adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
Absolutely, yeah. This burgeoning alliance, driven in part by shared geopolitical interests and a desire to kind of challenge the existing world order, has really significant implications. I mean, for Iran, it provides them with access to more advanced technology, it provides them with economic support, and crucially, it provides them a degree of protection on the world stage.
So Iran is taking a calculated risk here. They're pushing the boundaries of their nuclear program while simultaneously strengthening alliances with countries like Russia that can provide a buffer against international pressure.
Exactly. And it's this strategy of walking a tightrope, right? Like pushing as far as they can without triggering a major backlash, which is what makes the current situation so volatile.
Yeah.
One misstep, one miscalculation could have devastating consequences.
It's like we're watching a slow motion car crash, you know?
Yeah.
We can see the danger, but no one seems to be able to hit the brakes. And what worries me the most is the human cost of all this brinkmanship.
Yeah.
We can't forget about the civilians who are caught in the crossfire.
You're absolutely right. While the world focuses on, all the geopolitical maneuvering and the nuclear threat, there's a humanitarian crisis unfolding in the region.
Yeah. The articles we shared, they painted a particularly grim picture of the situation in Gaza and Beirut. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What's actually happening on the ground there?
Well, in Gaza, you have years of conflict and blockade that have left the population incredibly vulnerable. Hospitals are overwhelmed, essential supplies are scarce, and this recent escalation in violence has only made those challenges even worse. We're talking about a population that's really on the brink.
And the articles mentioned, similar challenges in Beirut.
Yeah, Beirut is really struggling to cope with this influx of displaced people who are fleeing the violence in the south. And the city's infrastructure, which was, already strained from years of economic crisis, is really struggling to cope.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, to feel, powerless. But what can be done? Is there any hope for de-escalation?
I mean, the situation it's undeniably bleak, but I do think there are glimmers of hope. The articles highlighted the really tireless work of these humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders.
Right.
They're providing, really vital aid to those in need. And their efforts, which are often carried out at great personal risk, are really a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And then on a broader level, there are ongoing diplomatic efforts, though they're often happening kind of behind closed doors,
Right.
It's a long shot, but I think the alternative, which is a wider war with potentially catastrophic consequences, it's unthinkable.
So what you're saying is we can't give up hope.
Exactly.
We have to keep pushing for peaceful solutions, keep supporting those organizations, those people who are working to help those caught in the crossfire, and most importantly, I think just stay informed, right?
Exactly. Awareness is key. Understanding the complexities, the motivations, the potential consequences, it's the first step towards even finding a path forward.
Well, it's been a heavy deep dive, that's for sure, but I think sometimes facing these uncomfortable truths head on is the only way to truly understand the world around us. And who knows, maybe by shining a light on these issues, on the human stories that are happening behind the headlines, maybe we can inspire others to take action, to demand better from our leaders. It's something to think about as we navigate these uncertain times.